We are back from the CBB Central podcast after a thrilling feast week. Hope you all had a lovely Thanksgiving. Brad, how was your Thanksgiving, my man? I spent mine in Florida. Not Florida, excuse me. I was in Texas, spending some good time with some family. Headed back, watched a football game on Saturday at Northwestern. And now
on
I've
Friday.
beaten the flights from a potential blizzard because there's a blizzard in Chicago tonight. How was your weekend?
Well, you cut out there for a minute, so I started giving my week, so I'll start over. Thanksgiving was okay. Friday was amazing, where I sat and watched 14 hours straight of basketball from that Villanova game all the way to about halftime of the Seton Hall game where I went to bed.
Very solid. I watched the Seton Hall game on Thanksgiving. I did not watch on Friday. And they just looked so average other than Miles Powell.
Yeah, Torian Thompson is a mess.
He was actually okay against Grand Canyon. He was still not good, but he was fine.
When I flipped on that game, there was like 2 or 3 minutes left, and they did either a pick and roll or like a kind of screen to screener action. And Thompson's man was open for a wide open three, and Thompson was still chilling in the lane. And he had like a very, very late closeout, and the Grand Canyon guy, I think it was Mike Finke, hits the three, and then Thompson to the bench. That was all I saw.
No, that was not his finer moment, but he actually looked good on offense at least, which he hasn't the rest of the year. So, yeah, I mean that tournament was there for the taking, which was frustrating for me as a Northwestern guy. Just didn't show up against Fresno, who, to their credit, looked very good against Miami and against Northwestern. They got some really good guards: New Williams, Deshaun Taylor, and Braxton Huggins. That's a heck of a trio. I think that's probably the second best team in the Mountain West behind Nevada. And then Utah State's in there. San Diego State's been fine. New Mexico is pretty average looking as of late. So, yeah, that'll be an interesting race. But I thought that tournament was there for the taking for Northwestern. He looked a lot better in their final two games against LaSalle. And then today against Utah, they were super impressive.
I mean, we talked about this a little bit on the Pac-12 preview, but I don't see it with Utah. And these early results have backed that up. But I don't see anything on their roster that would warrant any optimism. Like Bearfield is very blah. Yeah, he's very much an offense shot chucker kind of guy. They have a couple of okay wings. Donnie Tillman's a nice piece. Bigs are okay. Nothing that would ever indicate that they could compete for NCAA tournament bid or anything.
Oh yeah, I mean I think I like Riley Batten. I like Booth Catch. Both were pretty impressive to me. Timmy Allen looked pretty solid as well. So they got a nice little young core, but this is nowhere close to an NCAA tournament team. I'm just hoping they stay top 100, which I think they probably will, which would be a quadrant 2 for Northwestern. Given their non-con, that would be a win. I mean, Northwestern, that was my biggest concern about losing to Fresno was not is Northwestern not going to get is Northwestern going to have a bad loss to Fresno? It was Northwestern doesn't get a chance at Miami, who is the best chance at a quadrant 1 in the tournament, being a possible top 50 neutral game. And it did not work out that way, certainly for Northwestern, but to come away with at least one quadrant 2 win could be worse.
Yeah, the thing that most people don't understand about these tournaments is that first round game is the most important game of most teams' entire season. Because most of these tournaments, you can't get into the losers bracket. Like, look at Advocare, where in the winners bracket, you had Villanova, Oklahoma State, LSU, and Florida State. And then in the losers bracket, you had Canisius, Memphis, College of Charleston, and UAB. So let's say that Villanova, suffers a bad loss, right, and loses to Canisius. Now their next 2 games are going to be difficult because they come in such a short time span and they're on neutral court, and they're playing teams where it's a no-win situation, where if they win, no one cares because they were supposed to win. They lose, it's a bad loss. So that opening round game, from probably 90% of teams that play in those tournaments, is the single most important game of the entire season, because it allows you to get more opportunities where you're playing with house money. You might not even have to win them, but just avoiding the bad loss and kind of upping your strength of schedule is so critical.
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point. Especially, I thought it was a little less impactful in this event because the bottom wasn't that bad and the top wasn't that elite. Where like the opportunity cost of, say, not getting a chance at a Florida State and LSU and Oklahoma State instead of like a College of Charleston or a Canisius is probably less in this case, where the best win you could possibly get would be like beating Northwestern, Miami, or Seton Hall, I guess, or Utah, but just like that 4 elite teams who are maybe top 50 teams at best. And then like 4 pretty solid mid-major clubs. Fresno, I guess LaSalle's pretty terrible, but that's a decent program in general. But I mean, at least Fresno and Grand Canyon would have a chance to be quadrant 2 games. So it's a little less harmful, but I mean, in general, yeah, it's a huge deal in terms of, especially for teams who have weak non-cons. Like in Northwestern's case, the non-conference schedule, their best other games than this tournament are home games against DePaul, Georgia Tech, and Oklahoma. Oklahoma is their best chance at a quadrant 1. I don't see Oklahoma being a top 35 team, though. So they don't have another quadrant 1 opportunity. So they now are going the entire non-conference without a chance at a quadrant 1.
Yeah, and I mean, especially, I think Butler is an example where you have Dayton, and that's such an important game. They luck out to get Florida in the 5th place game, right? Because Florida loses to Oklahoma. But you know, the Florida win has a certain value and certain cachet now. But in March, you know, what if Florida's an NIT team? Then that win is useless. But you have this perception of Butler based on this quality win over Florida when people thought that they were still, you know, an NCAA tournament team. Same thing, I think. That could happen with Creighton, where Clemson hasn't looked great so far. But right now, they have a win over the 16th ranked team. I think in March, maybe that even slides, probably not to a quadrant 2, but I think Clemson's still probably a tournament team. But if Clemson's like a 9 or a 10 seed, that win isn't as big of a kind of a anchor, or like an anchoring point, like a defining feature of a Creighton's resume.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Definitely one of the more interesting storylines that I think some of the smart people in college basketball, I'd like to think you and I are among that group, do notice quite a bit. Let's talk Maui, Brad. Let's talk specifically Duke and Gonzaga. We can touch on some of the other teams we saw in that event. But, I mean, that was obviously the headline of college basketball this past week, and will probably be for the next month. That Gonzaga knocked off this Duke team. And Gonzaga did everything right, really. I mean, they kept them out of transition, which was the most important thing with Duke. I think everyone kind of understands that you have to make Duke beat you in the half court, which is what they did. And then I will say, I was impressed with how Duke finished. The final minute aside, they did a really good job locking in on defense down the stretch. They did a really good job of executing the half court until that final minute when kind of RJ took over in a way he probably shouldn't have, and they went over 7 in the final minute. But I mean, that's the recipe to beat Duke. The problem is very few teams even have the talent to do it. Like Army did a pretty good job of like just executing like crazy in the half court, but obviously didn't have the talent to stop Duke even when Duke was held into the half court. Gonzaga is one of the few teams that has the athleticism and size with Clark, with Hachimura, with Zach Norvell on the wing, with Kispert, with Petrusev, and all that size. They're one of the few teams in the country that actually has enough size to do what they did against Duke and still be able to win. I mean, there's probably 7 teams in the country that can realistically beat Duke unless Duke beats itself.
Yeah, and I mean, even with Duke right now, I mean, you didn't get a very good game from Cam Reddish. He hit a few shots later in the game, and then Bolden was also not to the level he was playing at earlier in the tournament. Certainly, even RJ Barrett, you know, he made some great plays in transition, especially in the second half. But he was 9 of 25. You know, so you kind of caught like this perfect storm. And Gonzaga played extremely well. Obviously, Rui Hachimura got a lot of the kind of praise, but also Josh Perkins, I thought, made some really nice passes. Something where he's normally more of a kind of bad shot taker, like a volume shooter type. But you know, I thought he really played within himself, really made some excellent passes. And then Zach Norvell, who I think is super underrated nationally, just because of people kind of gravitating more toward Hachimura and Tilly. But I think Norvell maybe even could be the best college player on this team by the end of the season, not even Hachimura.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Josh Perkins in particular because I thought really all of Maui, he was terrific as a ball handler and decision maker. Sure, he made wild decisions at times because that's who he is. And taking that away from his game would take more than just that. It would be very difficult for him to take away that type of aggressiveness that he plays with, to get rid of those turnovers and not take away an important part of how he plays the game. But I thought he did a really good job making good decisions, making passes, operating in pick and roll. I mean, I was super impressed with Perkins. I will say I've been very surprised how little a role Geno Crandall has had on this team. He's averaging 18 minutes a game through the first 6, only played 12 in this one, averaging about 5 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists. They really seem to have settled into Crandall as more of an off-the-bench player. And not maybe next to Perkins like we might have thought, or even taking Perkins off the floor in many cases. Perkins played 38 minutes against Duke, played similarly large minute totals throughout the event. So I thought that was a really interesting thing to note. But Philip Petrusev and Jeremy Jones have given them really good minutes. They're still not that they're not super deep, especially with Tilly out, but they're really good. They are an excellent basketball team.
I was going to bring up Jones and Petrusev, who played exceptionally well. Especially Petrusev hit some big shots, made some plays around the rim, hit at least one jumper. I think he hit multiple jumpers. He's someone who long term, like maybe even as soon as next year, if Hachimura and Tilly go pro, he steps in and he's kind of emerges as their new kind of start player, if you will. Kind of like Hachimura, who was relegated to a very small role as a freshman. Petrusev is certainly ahead of him. Not the athlete that Hachimura is, but is extremely skilled. And then Jones is like a glue guy. And then Crandall, I thought Crandall was going to start in the preseason instead of Kispert. Kispert's not that good, but so that spot is certainly up for grabs. But Crandall's going to need to play better. He kind of struggled in this game, even beyond the 1 for 6 shooting that the box score indicates. He just didn't really look great out there. But Gonzaga has an extended period of time in conference play where they can, they have such a talent advantage that they can kind of tinker. And I would not be surprised at all to see Crandall starting at that, essentially, the third guard spot by the time the NCAA tournament rolls around.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't be surprised either. I think Crandall, we have to remember, Crandall didn't get there until October. So he's still kind of working his way into a very veteran team that has played together for a really long time. So do you think that's something you can note? Some other results from Maui opened things up with Auburn and Xavier. Auburn went to overtime in that game. I thought Xavier looked very good. And then Xavier kind of fell off as the tournament went on. Wound up going just 1-2. They beat Illinois in their final game, but they got beat by San Diego State on the neutral floor. Auburn pushed Duke a little bit, but really just didn't have quite enough horses. Any thoughts on Auburn or Xavier?
So Auburn, I think that their backcourt was exceptional. Harper and Brown, especially Harper. Yeah, he looks fantastic. And the two of them with their ability to hit long range shots and also attack off the bounce. Especially Harper had some great takes. Had that kind of dunk that went, I wouldn't say viral, but it went around Twitter. And then Austin Wiley had some flashes. It still looks like he's getting into game shape. And then Chuma Okeke, when he stayed out of foul trouble, he was also exceptional. And I'm just interested to see when they get Donjel Purifoy back, how he kind of fits into this whole picture. They have 9 or 10 guys, including him, that warrant minutes. I mean, Anthony McLemore too, who's the current starting center. He also had some great moments in this tournament. Auburn came close to knocking off Duke. So this is certainly a team to watch. I still have Auburn, I think, 6th nationally. And in terms of Xavier, just what a missed opportunity. They were way up in the first half on San Diego State. They were just so sloppy. That Xavier-Illinois game was one of the sloppiest games of basketball I've ever seen. Just turnover after turnover, missed lobs. I mean, it was insane. But that was a must-win game for Xavier against Illinois. And then I think, looking at the rest of their non-conference schedule, I think that they have to win out. The most difficult game is going to be at Cincinnati, which is obviously a big rivalry game for them and should be a quadrant 1 win. But Xavier's resume right now, I think that they need to win out to feel like they're in a good position heading into Big East play.
Well, and And I think it brings back the point we've talked about with the Big East maybe not having those opportunities is that, for instance, a team in the Big Ten who sees themselves as a bubble team doesn't need as many quadrant one wins and resume wins in the non-conference because they're going to get chances in conference play. I believe last week there was either 8 or 9 teams in the top 28 of the top 25 of the AP top 25 from the Big Ten, which means every road game pretty much is going to be a quadrant one opportunity. Whereas in the Big East, I think because we have these questions of whether there are enough elite teams in the conference, there may just not be as many chances. So grabbing a quadrant one against the Cincinnati would be pretty big. Cincinnati should be a quadrant one of top 75 on the road. A couple other teams to touch on from this week at Maui. Illinois, 0-3, looked really good against Gonzaga, especially in the second half when Trent Frazier just went nuts. I think this is kind of their team. Their team, though, is they're just going to be super up and down. They have enough guards with a ton of talent to just, if one goes off, they've got a shot. But their margin of errors are so tight, and they're going to have games that are just really hard to explain. They lost to Georgetown, which now looks like a pretty bad loss at home. If you were a team that thinks anything about getting into the NCAA tournament, you got handled by Iowa State. That Xavier game was just so ugly. I did not come away all that impressed by Illinois, other than that Gonzaga second half, really.
No, Illinois is a year away if they can bring back their core for next season. I've said this since the summer with the U18s, but Ayo Dosunmu, he is a legitimate NBA prospect. He could go one and done. I know in our kind of prop bet podcast, I picked him as a sleeper one and done because now he's hitting shots. Over the summer, his jump shot was so off. He was not even close. That's why I compared him to Frank Ntilikina. But so far this season, he's shot the ball pretty well, and that just makes him even more dangerous for Illinois because he might play his way like over his recruiting rank to the point that they lose him after 1 year and kind of have to start over a little bit. But he is very, very good. Super versatile with great size, can guard 1 through 3. So I don't see Illinois as an NCAA tournament team this year, and they got to hope Ayo comes back for next year where they can make that leap up the Big Ten standings.
The other team I wanted to mention in Maui before we move on is just Iowa State. They struggled in their opener against Arizona. I give credit to Arizona, who played pretty well, and Justin Coleman was terrific in that ball game. Brian Luther was solid. Brandon Williams as well. But after that game, Iowa State looked tremendous in 2 blowout wins over Illinois and against San Diego State. They're getting really good production from Mariel Shayok, who's averaging 19 and 7. And Talen Horton-Tucker was really impressive at Maui. Once Wigginton's back into full game shape, they're going to be a real tough out because Michael Jacobson's playing super good basketball. If I had told you, Brad, that Michael Jacobson would be averaging 17 points and 7 rebounds, what would you have said?
Well, if Lard and Young were there, what would even be his role? This is someone who's taking advantage of this opportunity, and he's going to have a stranglehold over the starting position now because, I'm working on a top 15 most surprised or like top 10 most surprising players of the first month. And I've cut the list down to 15 at this point, and Jacobson's certainly on it. 17.7 points, 7.3 rebounds, 40% from 3, 67% from the field. Someone who averaged like 6 and 6 as a sophomore at Nebraska. And he's certainly playing well enough to kind of control that starting spot even when Lard comes back on. And Lard is a very, very talented player. He, especially in the paint, in the low post, he's great at sealing off his man, and he's a very powerful player. So once they get him in Wigginton back, especially, this is going to be a super dangerous Iowa State team, and it's a game that people who can take advantage and beat them now when they're shorthanded, that win is going to mature so nicely when they're at full strength. Yeah, that's something where you can kind of get like a cheap like resume building win, like a resume defining win by beating them shorthanded and then reaping the rewards when they're fully healthy.
Yeah, for Arizona, I think that is a tremendous win, especially given the potential lack of opportunity in the Pac-12, which we've kind of touched on it at length how weak we think this conference is. They have a tough schedule still. They still have a trip to Connecticut, a trip to Bama. They have Baylor. So there's a lot. There's plenty of tough games left for Arizona. And I think grabbing a quadrant one, possibly even seen as a resume kind of topper offer if this is a top 3 Big 12 team, which I think it can be. Certainly a huge win for Arizona. It's an Arizona team who I was not at all impressed by in their first 3 games. I mean, they just looked so ugly against Houston Baptist when I watched them for like 30 minutes and they blew the doors off in the final 10. Cal Poly hung around a little longer than they should have. Even UTEP hung around a little while. Like they just did not look that impressive. And in their final 2 games at Maui, they were kind of handled easily by 2 elite teams. But to get that quadrant 1 type win over Iowa State, certainly a big resume builder.
Then I think moving on, I mean, just like one note, I guess, on Arizona is, they played really well in Maui. I don't know how sustainable that's going to be. A guy like Justin Coleman, who's playing, so far above what he's shown in the past. I can really see him come back to earth. And then, I mean, Brandon Williams is also playing well. Brandon Randolph, kind of fulfilling on the promise that people had for him as a sleeper one and done. Now as a sophomore, he's playing really well. So I think that this Arizona team is certainly capable of an NCAA tournament bid, but the level that they were playing at Maui, which is, maybe a fringe top 25 team, I don't think that's very sustainable.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, Justin Coleman just shot the lights out. I forget which game it was, but he just could not miss in the one game I was watching, and just super impressive. Anything else on Maui, Brad?
Nope. I think just moving on to the was it the 2K class? No, it was NIT preseason tip-off.
NIT preseason for Kansas and Tennessee.
Yeah. Kansas and Tennessee. Overtime game. Tennessee had Kansas, and then Grant Williams fouls out. Kansas, with their superior depth, withstands the Azubuike foul out and kind of pulls away from Tennessee in overtime. Kevin, what were some of your impressions from this game?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't come away super impressed by Kansas, if I'm being honest. Dedrick Lawson was terrific, really bailed them out in this game, and I thought Devon Dotson, he's still getting there as a shot creator for himself, but he plays with just incredible tempo. He's such an incredibly fun player to watch. I think my biggest takeaway from every time I've watched Kansas this year is how important it was that LaGerald Vick wound his way back up at Kansas, and secondly, that he didn't wind up at Louisville, because I know there was the buzz of the Gerald Vick's on campus. Like, is he going to transfer? Could he have been a grad transfer? I mean, if he was a grad transfer and playing like this at Louisville, they'd be a tournament team, like for sure. Gerald Vick has played really good basketball. He wasn't perfect in this game, but very solid. This Kansas team has really relied on just mauling people up front with Azubuike, and then Vick just hitting big shots. Right. With Azubuike in foul trouble against Tennessee, they struggled at times. And the Grant Williams foul out was certainly fortuitous. I've been impressed with just how well Tennessee has played. And I mean, just to see the way that Grant Williams was not only scoring the ball, but passing the ball, at 6 assists in this game, passing out of the post. Yeah, just watch out for Tennessee. Like that's one of those where like I might move them up in my rankings by a spot despite the loss. I mean, they were just super impressive to me.
Yeah, the game kind of slipped away from Tennessee when Williams fouls out, and then they turn to Lamonte Turner, who just recently came back from a shoulder injury, and he was way off on like 3 or 4 straight jump shots, and that's wasted possessions. And then Kansas, really kind of turned the tables using Dedrick Lawson at the 5 and then KJ Lawson at the 4. You mentioned Vick too. I mean, he's so improved. He's certainly on my surprise player watch list. He's scoring like 20 points a game, but it's his feel for the game looks noticeably better as well. Making the right play, which was so absent last year. Quentin Grimes. I mean, he shot the lights out. That first game, he has since come back to earth. I'm feeling better about my prediction about him not being a first round pick. Still have a long way to go, but in that U18 tournament, I mean, give me Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, Cole Anthony, Tyrese Maxey all over Quentin Grimes. Despite winning the MVP, I thought Grimes was the 5th best guard on that roster.
Yes, I would completely agree that Grimes did not look very good. I honestly don't think Charlie Moore looked very good. I'm still out on Charlie Moore. This team isn't necessarily as deep as we might have thought. They're getting there. I was not. I didn't come away super impressed by Kansas, but at the same time, they beat a top 5 team. So I mean, how do you reckon with that one?
Yeah, they didn't have Marcus Garrett either. It was probably their 6th man. He may even be a better fit in the starting lineup than Grimes right now. I mean, next to Vic and Dodson. But I mean, Grimes still makes plays. I mean, that's kind of his kind of player profile, I guess. Is like he's a smart player, tough defender, can play the 1 and the 2. Doesn't shoot it great, but is like a smart player. And against Tennessee, he was not making smart plays, but that could be kind of a product of him missing shots and stuff. But I feel like he'll still be a very good college player. So by the end of the season, I'm sure he'll be back to his high IQ and kind of defensive abilities.
Yeah, completely. Wondered if you had any thoughts on the other games in that event. Any thoughts on Louisville or Marquette? I didn't see a ton of them, but didn't know if you had anything.
Yeah, so I'm selling my Marquette stock even with that win. I vastly overrated Ed Morrow. I vastly overrated Chartouni, and I vastly overrated Brendan Bailey so far. Those are 3 guys I thought were going to be extremely prominent. I had Chartouni and Morrow ranked in my top 30 of my Big East player rankings. I think I had Morrow at 21. I mean, I've been so off on all these grad transfers and transfers. Just, I mean, maybe I should give them more time to assimilate. But the whole idea of these grad transfers is that they're plug and play. You don't have as much time to kind of mess around and get them assimilated. So I'm selling my Marquette stock. I still think that they're a tournament team, maybe like an 8 or 9 seed, but not the top 25 team I thought. In terms of Louisville, another team, I don't know how sustainable this is. Kristen Cunningham was playing out of his mind. Stephen Enoch was playing really well. Jordan Nwora. I just don't know if these guys come back to earth. I feel like they do. And I still think I lean NIT for Louisville, but I think that they might be a little better than I thought, and probably than you thought as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree on all fronts. I mean, Cunningham went nuts in that game. I watched a little bit, and I was like, "Who is that?" And realized it was Christian Cunningham. I was talking to Michael Hunter on his podcast today about Louisville briefly, and he basically said, he was talking about how poorly VJ King was playing, and my point was basically, if VJ King, who is probably one of their 3 most talented players and one of their only 3 elite talent level players, is playing as poorly as VJ King has played, they don't have a shot at dancing, at least. And VJ King has just got to play better, despite how well Jordan Nwora is playing, despite how well some of the other guys are playing. They just need better from VJ King.
Yep, and I think that concludes that. We'll call it the Advocare, but really we want to focus here on Villanova, who redeems itself, winning 3 games. At the time, I thought it was only going to be 1 quality win, being Florida State, which obviously a quadrant 1 win, beating a top 20 caliber team on neutral court. But also Oklahoma State knocks off LSU in the 3rd place game, which pretty much gives Nova a second quality win out of this. They didn't look great today, and I watched 3 quarters of the game. It was very tight throughout. They didn't look great, but they're certainly moving in the right direction, building a resume now. So Kevin, what are some of your thoughts on this Villanova resurgence?
Yeah, certainly not surprised necessarily by that. By them winning this tournament. I picked it in our picks last week. I just thought they'd come ready to play. Today in particular, I was bouncing back and forth between that game and the Northwestern game. Always tough to balance fanhood versus the game you need to watch to scout. They're just not as deep as I expected they'd be, Villanova. Just not getting a ton from Cole Swider. Joe Cremo still kind of getting there. Jermaine Samuels has been pretty average. I mean, I don't think we expected Sadiq Bey to be as important to this team as he has been. I mean, I'm still a little surprised they haven't been going small more with Pascal at the 5 and playing Cosby Roundtree a little bit less, although he's been solid, averaging about 7 points, 9 rebounds a game. I think they're still kind of figuring it out. But yeah, I mean, they look fine. They look like a top 25 team today and in this tournament, maybe even top 15. Once they figure things out, I think they'll be A-okay. And yeah, I think they definitely got. I think they might have gotten a second quadrant 1 win this weekend because that Oklahoma State team looked really good this weekend, and both Oklahoma State and Oklahoma both looked very solid this weekend in their respective MTEs.
So in terms of Nova, I think that Cosby Roundtree is playing excellent. I think he's certainly who they need to be using at the 5 right now. I mean, he rebounds so well. He rebounds out of his area. He did a great job defensively today, and he's a very athletic finisher who can finish around the rim, and especially defensively. When he was out, he picked up 2 fouls in the first half, especially against a bigger and very athletic team like Florida State. Although they only play one big at a time, really, but they got killed on the glass, Villanova, when Cosby Roundtree was sitting with 2 fouls because they don't have that kind of that Josh Hart or like that. Even like a DiVincenzo or like a Mikal Bridges that are athletic, smaller, and are willing to compete and fight inside. You know, like Swider's not really that type. Samuels isn't really that type. I mean, Cremo's small. Cremo hasn't looked good at all. He was someone that I think I've also heavily overrated thus far. So I think that kind of their kind of normal advantage with the playing Pascal at the 5. I don't think that they can really resort to that. I think that they've been better so far with Pascal at the 4 and Cosby Roundtree at the 5. Their main problem for me has been point guard play. I mean, Gillespie was good today, but they still, really look like they lack that kind of main initiator, that kind of table setter. I think Gillespie's probably better off the ball. And if Quinterly was playing up to his expectation, he and Gillespie could share the backcourt, and that would be a kind of suitable solution there.
Right. Yeah, I think that was more my point with the 5, with playing Pascal at the 5, is that I guess I'd be conceding the glass in order to have more shooters if you're not going to have a great creating backcourt with Gillespie playing the point. I think if you play Pascal at the 5, you can play 5 out. Then you got Booth, Bey, maybe Cremo if he can get better, Quinterly, guys like that. So you have more ball handlers, more guys who can attack off the bounce, more guys who can push in transition, and more spacing. I think that helps the offense. We only had 6 assists today. That's not going to win you a lot of ball games, but they were efficient around the rim, and that was really important. I think Cosby Roundtree still has an important role. I think I would be going like a 20-20 split in terms of Cosby Roundtree playing the 5, 20 minutes, and Pascal at the 5, 20 minutes.
And then I guess Oklahoma State, I thought Swider played pretty well as well. He had one just horrible defensive sequence where he went to close out and just fell over, and his man got an open layup. But I mean, he hit shots. The shot looks good. He can play. I think down the road he'll be like their starting 4-man. Maybe not this year, but in the future. But for now, he's playing both the 3 and the 4. And then I think he'll emerge as a valuable piece soon. I don't really have starting expectations for him this year because Bey has been solid. I think that they got to stick with that Gillespie, Booth, Bey, Pascal, and Cosby Roundtree for now. But I can certainly see if Cremo turns things around or if Swider turns things around that they kind of work their way into that starting 5.
Yeah, I think this was a little bit more of a rebuild, like a long-term recruiting class than a this year rebuild recruiting class, which is what they really needed given what they lost. To be that top 10 type team that we've kind of talked about. But yeah.
But if they had DiVincenzo and Spellman, then this team doesn't miss a beat.
Right, it was all about the draft decisions.
Even if it was like Gillespie, Booth, DiVincenzo, Pascal, Spellman, I mean, that's up there for number 1.
Yeah, no, they'd be so dangerous.
Moving on to Big 12, we wanted to kind of touch on these bottom 3 teams, at least the the three consensus bottom teams in the preseason being Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, and Baylor, and kind of where these guys stand. Preseason, I had Oklahoma as last. I thought that they were the last by far, but they've looked a little better. They got the win over Florida in Battle for Atlantis. I think their only loss is to Wisconsin. They pulled out a win against Dayton. So, Kevin, how have your opinions changed on this bottom trio?
Yeah, definitely came away impressed with Oklahoma. I mean, obviously, it's tough because once again, how much do we value Florida at this point, given the sort of results haven't backed them up being that good a team? But beating Florida and Dayton, their defense looks really good. I mean, that was the thing last year, is they were horrific on defense. They were pretty terrible, everything but Trae Young. And Christian James has been much better this season. They've got just enough from Calixte, from Miles Reynolds, even from like Brady Manick to score beyond James. And then Jamondy McNeese is still a really good rim protector who makes plays. They're a little deeper than I expected. I mean, I was very impressed by them. I think they're a legit tournament contender.
See, I think I disagree there. I think that they're better than I would have thought. I still think that they're going to end up like 4-14 or like 5-13 in the Big 12, just because I still don't think that their talent can kind of reach that second tier with West Virginia when they figure things out, which I think will happen. By conference play. TCU when Jalen Fisher gets back, even like Kansas State, Texas Tech, I think that they are still high enough above Oklahoma that even though Oklahoma's better, they're still going to finish. I think I'd put them 9th right now if I had to make a prediction for how the Big 12 would end out in March.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they finish 8th or 9th, but I think they go like 6-12, 7-11, which might be enough to just keep them hanging in the conversation for a really long time. Where they're like, oh, if they can just beat Kansas, they could be like an 8-10 team with good wins. Like, yeah, I wouldn't bet on this being a tournament team, but I think they'll hang in the discussion a lot more than we expected, I guess would be my point.
Yeah, because I mean the whole strength of the Big 12 this year is going to be its parity and like its strength or its parity in the middle, right? Kansas is still the favorite, and then its strength of the bottom. Like, give me Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, and Baylor over the bottom 3 teams in any conference. I mean, the other conferences that people kind of bring up as being the best. So let's look at the Big Ten, where give me the 3 Big 12 bottom feeders over Rutgers, Illinois, and Penn State. Even your Northwestern Wildcats. In the SEC, give me those 3 over Missouri, A&M, South Carolina, Georgia, certainly. You move to the ACC, Wake, Boston College, Pitt, Georgia Tech. Give me those 3 Big 12 teams over them easily.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Wake is terrible. Like, we don't have time to talk on this podcast about Wake Forest because they're just not relevant enough, other than that Danny Manning is not going to be their coach next year, and Wes Miller probably will be. Bold prediction. I don't even know if that's bold.
I mean, he gave Jeff Bzdelik what 5 or 6, he gave Bzdelik many more years beyond his time. I know that they were buddies, the AD and Jeff Bzdelik. I'm not even sure if they have the same AD. I didn't look this up or anything. But Wake, in the same vein as like a Penn State, I would not be surprised if they get a year or 2 past their expiration date.
Wake is too much a basketball school not to make a move. In my book, if they go like 3-15 in the ACC, which seems likely.
Yeah.
Like a Penn State can have bad years and no one cares because it's like, is football winning? And that's the bottom line. Like, Wake Forest is not a football school. It is a basketball school through and through, which is why I think he's probably done, especially given I'm sure Wes Miller has, made it, his agent has made it known that he would look at that job. Wes Miller would be an instant upgrade in my mind over Danny Manning.
I mean, there's a bunch of guys down there. I mean, you have Earl Grant from College of Charleston, I mean, they're trying to think of some other ones off the top of my head from down south.
Steve Forbes at ETSU.
Yeah,
There's a lot of good ones.
I used to have a list, but I don't know where I put that. But
yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, I would say him and Chris Mooney are the two coaches who have not helped themselves on the hot seat so far.
I mean, Mooney's another guy who's overstayed his welcome, right? They have like the Fire Mooney people on Twitter.
He's toast. He just got 20-piece by Hampton today.
I've never liked him because when Providence hired Keno Davis, they first offered it to Mooney, and Mooney was like, I would never take that job in like a million years. Well, I think since then, I'm not sure if they've even made the tournament since then, because
they've not been
wasn't there? Oh no, they definitely did at least once, I think, because they had Justin Harper since then. I don't know where.
It's not good. I would say that. But Oklahoma State has also looked better than I expected. Did want to touch on them briefly as well. I mean, didn't really do too much against Villanova, but beat Memphis comfortably. That said, Memphis did lose to College of Charleston. They beat College of Charleston, and then they beat LSU today. So a really nice weekend for Oklahoma State at Advocare. Cam McGriff has played excellent basketball. They're deep in the backcourt between Cunningham, Waters, Weathers, who's now back. Isaac likely is playing really good basketball, and they're getting just enough from their front court to just hang in. They're playing small a lot with McGriff at the 5. I'm super impressed.
Yeah, Cam McGriff was someone who, watching him last year, I was really high on. I really like his versatility. He's a powerful player who's also mobile enough to play that 4 spot and be kind of a matchup nightmare at the 5. And then Yoran Nye, I guess, has played really well. I haven't seen too much of his playing really well. I watched them play Villanova, and they kind of got blown out there. But I completely agree with the kind of the state of their backcourt. I mean, Weathers is certainly a very good player, especially from his time at Miami, Ohio, when he had more responsibility. He was this consummate triple-double threat. And Isaac likely looks like their kind of guard of the future. And then they get Curtis Jones back soon, probably within 2 or 3 weeks. Former top 100 recruit, kind of a shooter scorer on the wing, gives them even more firepower. I think if I were to pick today, I'd move Oklahoma State from my preseason spot of 9 up to 8. But I still think that they're behind that West Virginia, TCU, Texas Tech block.
If TCU isn't healthy, I mean, I start to get pretty scared. Like, if Jalen Fisher doesn't get back, I start to worry about that group a little bit.
Is he back at all, or he played 1 game, 7 minutes? That's what the stats, like the game statistics say. I don't know the context behind that, but
yeah, I did not see. But if he is not like 100%, I would worry. Let's just put that out there.
And then Kouat Noi, who's probably the 3rd best player behind Desmond Bane, he's only played in 1 game himself too. Yeah. So, I mean, they are certainly a team. There are a few teams that can miss their 1st and 3rd best player and kind of tread water. Like they need these guys back.
Yeah, I completely agree. Let's talk the Las Vegas Invitational. Also want to quickly touch on Battle for Atlantis after that. But yeah, Texas looked really good in this event. Wheels kind of came off in the second half against Michigan State, but they beat North Carolina. They just looked a lot more free on the floor, really using their athleticism to their advantage, shooting the ball than they have in the past. I mean, I was very impressed, especially given my first taste of Texas was watching them really struggle with Arkansas. Just for them to come out against North Carolina and get 32 from Kerwin Roach, get 16 from Matt Coleman. Jackson Hayes was such a difference maker, especially in that North Carolina game. I mean, yeah, they're very impressive to me.
Jackson Hayes was, I mean, he's one of the most surprising players in the country. I mean, he could be a one and done easily. He's so fluid. He's so athletic. He just looks the part. He blocks shots. He finishes above the rim. I mean, he's the next in a long line of Texas centers. to be an NBA player, certainly. And it could really happen sooner rather than later. He's been that impressive. And then Kerwin Roach had the game of his life. I mean, against UNC, he had, you mentioned 32 points, but he was hitting shots. He was making plays. He was incredible. And then, they haven't really gotten great production out of their other guards. But I think certainly the guards are an upgrade from years past. Incorporating guys like Elijah Mitchell-Long and Courtney Ramey, and then the jumps that Coleman and Febres make in year 2. I think that this Texas team is in a very good spot. I think I have them 10th or 11th nationally right now. Even though that they lost to Michigan State, and you mentioned the wheels kind of came off. Super impressive, and I think they'll be a fixture in the top 25 this whole season.
Yeah, I will have them ranked. Very, very impressed. I mean, I will say they fell in love with the 3 a little bit against Michigan State. Texas, even if they're hitting some shots, should not be a team taking 34 threes in a game. Is that fair?
No, get Ozikowski post touches.
I mean, yeah, I just like that they were playing fast against North Carolina. I mean, they got up and down. That was impressive.
I mean, Kobe White was awesome in that game too. He's another guy that could hamstring UNC by leaving before expected, and these NBA draft early entries strike again.
Yeah, my favorite thing about UNC is every single game, going on Twitter during a UNC game and seeing all the like NBA draft Twitter people just up in arms that Nasir Little isn't playing. Like, how is Nasir Little not playing 32 minutes a game? He's the next Kawhi Leonard.
He should be playing over Garrison. I mean, come on, Roy. You figured it out last year when you slot Pinson in at that spot. Slot Little in at the small ball 4. Slide made at the 5.
He's playing plenty, though. He's playing like 20 minutes a game, averaging 13 points and 5 rebounds. I think they like him in that role of like come in, energy, offense, etc., and then letting Brooks play 20 minutes a night as well.
And then Leaky Black has also looked good. He played a lot of point guard with 7th Woods out. He looked pretty natural there. He's someone who could come in and play three different positions. He'll be a useful piece, probably as UNC's 7th man. So pretty prominent role for the freshman.
Kenny Williams has not been all that impressive, though.
No, I've never been a huge Kenny Williams guy. Cam Johnson looks really good, though.
I was really big on Kenny Williams last year. Maybe it's because every time I turned on North Carolina, he hit like 3 big threes. He was like, it feels like there's a few guys in the country where you just watch them and they never miss.
Henry Badley for me.
That was him.
Yeah, definitely Henry Badley for me is one. I'm trying to think of some others where it's just like whenever you watch that, they're just dominant. Yeah, I can't think of another one off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, I don't know. But yeah, Kenny Williams has to play a little better. I wasn't too concerned with UNC. I think the defense should be better. But also, Kerwin Roach is not going to put up 32 most games. And Texas isn't going to hit 46% of their threes.
Okay, and then moving on, right? We're going to talk Battle for Atlantis, where Virginia does Virginia things, despite not getting meaningful contribution from Braxton Key. At least, when I was watching, he was struggling. He wasn't finishing at the rim. Didn't look like the player that I expected him to be. But Virginia withstands anyway. Knocks off a pretty good Wisconsin team. In that game, that was a very one-dimensional offensive showing where it was Ethan Happ making plays. But he is an excellent player. He's one of the top players in the country. But I think Wisconsin showed that they're going to be pretty good. I think Virginia showed that they're going to be up with the elites in college basketball once again.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the look with Kihei Clark. I believe it's from maybe Kaihei. I don't know, but they're using him a lot more than I maybe expected him. I thought he would be like a change of pace guard off the bench. Instead, they're using it as an opportunity to let Ty Jerome do a little bit more scoring. I really like that look. I think he's really good. He's really pesky on both ends of the floor, and definitely a useful player for them. Yeah, Virginia looked the part. I thought Wisconsin was pretty impressive once again. In the second half, Wisconsin has a gear that they didn't have last year on the offensive end, where when they're clicking, when they click, they're so dangerous. Like Trice, Davison can go get buckets, and Hap's just so solid. I mean, when they click, they have legit second weekend NCAA tournament potential. When they don't, their offense does not look good. And they really had to grind it out against Stanford. Didn't look that great in that game, but still won pretty handily. Then Oklahoma comes around and they struggle in the first half. In the second half, they just put it away. So yeah, I was impressed with Wisconsin. I think I might rank them again this week.
Yeah, I'm certainly ranking Wisconsin. I think that they even slipped up to 16th in mine, which is higher than I feel comfortable with. But you have to drop this team. You have to drop this team. All of a sudden, Wisconsin's 16th in your rankings. But if they can get consistent shot making from Kobe King, and he kind of emerges as even like that starting 3-man, they go maybe Trice, Davison, King, Iverson, and Hap with like Roivers and Ford off the bench. That could be a pretty potent lineup, especially if King continues his hot shooting.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I don't know if I'll go that high on him, but yeah, I mean, given the lack of other options that I've been kind of facing when starting to plan ahead for my next Rockin' 25 poll, yeah, wouldn't surprise me, certainly.
Right, because so I had Florida State and LSU ahead of them, but you have LSU loses to an unranked team, and then Florida State beat LSU, and then Villanova beat Florida State, but Villanova's lost to Furman. So you kind of have to. I mean, it would be kind of illogical to rank, to like not move Florida State down because you have to slot Villanova ahead of them. But then it's like Villanova's lost to Furman. How can you have them so high? So it's like a big mess.
Yeah. Yeah, completely agree. There's just not a lot of teams out there that you feel great about ranking. And so you're either going to rank teams who maybe don't deserve to be a top 25 team just because they have not really lost yet, or you're going to rank teams that may not deserve to be in the top 25 based on like based on what you've seen, based on like their record, but you just believe in them long term.
Yeah, that's why I approach the top 25 as in I'm trying to predict how the final top 25 will look on whatever March 10th or whatever Selection Sunday is. And then each week when we get more data, there's more results factored into these predictions.
Yeah, it's a pretty good way of approaching it. What else did we want to touch? We wanted to touch on some mid-major stuff real quick, Brad, didn't we? I got to say, I'm very concerned about mid-major basketball's potential at-large bid potential. We talked about this a little preseason. Weren't really sure what to think. And Western Kentucky gets a really bad loss against an Indiana State team that I do not think will finish in the top 7 of the Missouri Valley. The A-10 looks bad still. San Diego State didn't really look at large quality to me. The Mountain West kind of looks like a one bid. I mean, just up and down. Loyola got hammered by Boston College. That is just nowhere close to an at-large team. And I don't think anyone in the A-10 in the Missouri Valley is, especially given Illinois State's early struggles. I mean, I'll see Loyola on Tuesday night against Nevada. I would be surprised if Loyola keeps that game that close. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of at-large bids out there for mid-majors right now.
In the preseason, I mean, the people who had Illinois State as an at-large team, I mean, come on. I mean, maybe when they had Elijah Clarence, if like you're buying his breakout after this strong FIBA performance, but I mean, come on. Like that was never going to happen. And even the Loyola at large, when you kind of took a step back and kind of broke it down, I certainly had them as like a 3 seed in the NIT, so not super far away from an at large, but there are people who had them in the top 25, which was incredible.
There was a case for Loyola as an at large if you wanted to buy all the stock you could possibly buy in Aher Uguak and Lucas Williamson. If you were just like those two guys step in seamlessly for Ingram and Ben Richardson, and they get some stuff out of their freshmen, yeah, they could be an at-large. But I mean, Uguak is also just not Dante Ingram, and Lucas Williamson is not Ben Richardson. And
exactly because sorry, but when a Loyola fan was angry at me like months ago, like in July, and I said like how can you even rationalize Loyola being a top 25? And he's I said by ranking Loyola in the top 25, you're completely dismissing Andre Jackson and Dante Ingram. And he said no because Aher Uguak is as good as Dante Ingram. He said Christian Negron was as good as Andre Jackson.
Ooh,
And
that's the take.
Aher Uguak, 26 minutes a game, 6.5 points, 9% from three. Christian Negron, 6 minutes a game, 1.5 points a game. Now we compare that to Dante Ingram, who was 11 points, 6.4 rebounds, 39% from three, and Andre Jackson, who was 11 points a game, 36% from three. I don't think that they're equal.
Yeah, I'll generally note Cam Krutwig has been awesome and will continue to be awesome. Clayton Custer's still really good. Marcus Towns still really good. And Uguak is a really nice slasher, role player, kind of do everything, glue guy, Swiss Army knife. He put up 15 in the Loyola game I was at against Niagara. Granted, not great competition. Niagara team that just lost to Grambling State this weekend, but also beat Wyoming. So whatever we want to say about that performance by Loyola, I mean, they're just like Uguak just couldn't shoot the ball. I mean, I asked Porter Mosier after. I was like, "What do you guys see from him as a shooter?" And they think he can shoot. They're like, "We've seen him shoot it in practice. He's a good 3-point shooter. He's gotten hot at times." His 3-point shots were just nowhere close. I mean, he bricked one, and it wasn't. And then he shot one that went like too long for the rim, and then hit the side of the backboard, and then just landed kind of pitifully. And then he didn't take a three the rest of the game. And that just kills them because their whole thing last year was like 4 out, 1 in, tons of space for Krutwig. All the guard, everybody else gets one-on-ones. They can attack out of that and just drive and kick. But now, because Uguak's a non-shooter, you're just giving pad on him. And when he catches the ball, he just has to swing it again. And their offense just doesn't get as good of a look. It is it's a stark contrast. They have to be a much more running team this year. And I don't know if they will be.
So we kind of briefly touched on this earlier with the kind of mid-majors not going to get any at-large bids. It looks like, or at least very limited number. Why do you think that it's fallen off so much? Like what do you attribute the kind of main reason to why the Mountain West, the A10, all these leagues with all these teams that were consistently competing for bids have no longer been competing at that level?
So if I were going to be the on-brand mid-major guy, what I would say is that all these players get to transfer out of their programs and they never keep talent, and that that high majors don't allow them to get quality wins by not playing teams. I don't think that's the root cause. I think the thing that's very simple with the A10 and the Mountain West and the Valley to a certain degree, Valley lost a really good team, so that's part of it, is the coaching hires have just like the A10's coaching turnover in the last several years has been absurd. I mean, just kind of like running it down. VCU lost Shaka and Will Wade, two high-level recruiters who consistently brought 4-star talent and are now bringing in 5-star talent at their current homes. St. Louis had a coaching change. Duquesne had a coaching change. Both are better off than they were before their coaching changes, and as a result, have risen in the standings. Dayton lost an elite coach in Archie Miller to an elite program. Now is Anthony Grant, who's doing a better job, but they need time. UMass fired a coach who was not successful. St. Joe's still has Martelli. Davidson still has Bob McKillop. Rhode Island lost their best coach in program history to an elite program in UConn. Richmond.
Time out. He wasn't their best coach in program history, but go on.
Okay, he did a great job, and he went to an elite.
You're sliding Al Skinner and Jim Herrick.
Fair. Okay, they lost a really good coach. Richmond has a bad coach in Chris Mooney. George Mason is not getting funded enough to contribute to be a contender in the A10. Paulson's fine, but he's nothing special. St. Bonaventure has Mark Schmidt, but also just doesn't have the funding to be elite. George Washington lost a good coach in Lonergan because of factors beyond their control. LaSalle had to replace a coach. Every single A10 job has turned over in the last, I believe, 5 years, except for Bonnie's, Richmond. Yeah, I think just Bonnie's, Richmond, St. Joe's, and Davidson. Everything else has turned over in the last 5 years. When you have that type of turnover and you're not continuing to hire at that elite level, you're going to struggle. I think that's the big cause. And the Mountain West is 2 years ahead of the A10. And they got into a bad coaching cycle where they had a lot of pretty mediocre coaches. And Craig Smith is now in there. He's doing a really good job at Utah State. They also got Nico Medved at Colorado State. But I think you still got to flip. Menzies at UNLV has to flip, I think, eventually. They have an elite coach in Muss. Weir's, I think, going to be fine. Same with Dutcher at San Diego State. I think it's really just coaches to answer your question. And until you hire at elite level of coaches, you're going to struggle.
And then in regards to the George Mason thing, like I don't know how well they're funded, but there is no excuse for this team to be that bad. I mean, funding can like hurt recruiting. Like you can't take as many plane rides, you can't go out and see players as much, or you can't do charter flights. But for the team that they have to be so bad is absolutely inexcusable. I mean, they were legitimately on paper a top at worst 4 team in the A10 at worst, and they've just bottomed out. And it's just that you just can't have that. You can't have teams that kind of grow old and they take their lumps and they kind of build toward a season and then have it all fall flat.
Yeah, I'm just confused as to what has happened. I haven't watched a ton, but Otis Livingston has been so mediocre this year after being an elite player last year. Goen Armar, who I thought was a breakout guy, is averaging 1.9 points a game after being terrific last season. I mean, their offense is just putrid. And I think the thing is I think we all overestimated their talent level last year. And it was, they're talented. They're just not deep. So they're kind of taking some lumps, but they're just hanging around as a 500 team. And when Paulson, finally has some depth, plus adds Jared Reuter, they'll be good. I think we way overestimated the talent. And that makes sense, given, with the exception of Marr, who was a pretty highly regarded recruit, was a 3-star kid out of Minnesota, had some good offers. None of these guys were highly recruited. Him and Reuter, I suppose. Paulson kind of thrived on just recruiting under the radar guys, but this year it's just bottomed out. I mean, they shouldn't be as bad as they are, certainly, but maybe the top 4 hype was unfair to begin with.
Well, I mean, they were 9-9 last year, right? I mean, you mentioned that Reuter and Marr were highly recruited, and then Livingston, Greer, and Keir, and even Boyd. I mean, they all produced in the A10. I mean, there is something to even bad teams have leading scorers, but at some point, you have older guys. They've produced. The team has won A10 games. That should mean something. And AJ Wilson was a relatively highly rated recruit. I think Greg Calise was like a 3-star as well. But I watched them play one game over the summer, and they were just horrendous. And I kind of wrote it off to Jair Greer was out, and the court was slippery. And I kind of was like, I don't feel as good about putting George Mason second. I moved them from my last team in the NCAA tournament to like a 2 or 3 seed in the NIT. But I was still confident that this was an upper level A10 team. But I guess that was more revealing than I thought.
Yeah, it's tough. I think Paulson's a really good coach and a really good guy, but it is hard to explain why they are as bad as they are right now. I mean, they struggled. They barely beat Southern. A winless Southern team came to their home court and had George Mason on the ropes. George Mason won by 4. How does that happen?
And even not talking about George Mason, but in terms of like programs that have fallen, like I remember Old Dominion used to get like eight and 9 seeds like pretty consistently, right? And then Northern Iowa, they were a 5 seed 4 or 5 years ago.
The Tuttle team, yeah,
Yeah.
they played Larry Nance's or not Larry, yeah, Larry Nance Jr.'s Wyoming team.
Then you had Colorado State when they had like Pierce Hornung and Colton Iverson. That was a very good team. The Mountain West kind of, it was when UNLV was getting these recruits but wasn't winning enough. And then Alford goes to UCLA and they just promote the assistant to keep Bairstow and Kirk and Snell and Williams. That's when I think you mentioned the coaching, but that was when it all went down. I think is when they get Neal in there, and New Mexico has a good team. They were like a 3 seed. They lose to Harvard in the first round, and then just straight downhill ever since that. And then when you have such a top heavy league like these mid-major leagues are, you can't have these bigger programs kind of falter, like your New Mexico, your UNLV, even like San Diego State dipped for a few years. It just can't happen. And then when the whole league is down, there's too many minefields, and then teams that are actually tournament quality can kind of get suppressed if they take a few more bad losses.
Yeah, no, it's really tough, and it's a situation that I don't know. Like, will it get better? I mean, I was legit worried for Dayton in the A10. I was just not sold on Grant, and I've become a lot more sold because this is something I saw a couple days before the season, was that Anthony Grant's defenses throughout his career have been terrific, and last year they were horrible, and this year the defense has been much improved. That combined with Obi Toppin looking good, Dwayne Cole's been fine, Landers and Crutcher, who are young, are looking good. They're recruiting well. I think Dayton's going to be fine. VCU should be fine with Rhodes. I think he'll get there. Like, those programs have to get to the top again, and the same goes in the Mountain West. UNLV needs. I think you got to go move on for Menzies after this year. I've talked to Eli Betker about this a little bit. He wasn't really sure what's going to happen there, and he says he didn't think they'd move on unless they bottom out. But I mean, I know they've won 4 in a row, but beating Southern Utah by 5 and Oakland by 13 isn't exactly a super appealing result to me. We'll see on Wednesday when they play Valpo, and they have Cincinnati, Illinois, BYU, and then at Hawaii in a row. I believe at Hawaii is actually part of the Diamond Head, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I mean that could be when they really struggle, is they have that type of run. If they lose a bunch of those games and lose a bunch of Mountain West games, maybe Menzies gets fired, but I don't think he's the guy.
And like a few other teams off the top of my head that had some good runs. I mean, Boise State, if they didn't lose Paris Austin last year, I think that they would have been in that 8-9 seed range. Said they go at NIT, right? And then this year they're kind of feeling the losses of Chandler Hutchinson and Sengfelder and all those guys. But I mean, they're a team that cycles through pretty consistently every couple of years, or they're in the mix. They get under the radar guy. Well, there was, what was his name? Anthony Drimmick and Derek Marks. And then LaSalle was a team that was very good for a few years, and now they've completely bottomed out. When they had like Tyrone Garland and Ramon Galloway, a few other guards there, they were a Sweet 16 team, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was probably like 6 years ago. Time really flies.
Yeah, no, it's wild. I mean, just these leagues have to recruit dudes like that again in order to get where they need to be. And who knows why they're not recruiting those? It could be coaching. It could also coincide with it's never been easier to be seen by a college coach. Correct? I mean, that might change, but with these new recruiting rules. But as every single article about a mid-major player now gets titled, he might not have had a scholarship if not for this. It's so annoying. But anywho, I do think maybe it's just guys blow up and get high major offers late. Maybe it's just like, for instance, Matt Mitchell goes to San Diego State, could have went to Utah. He was headed to Cal State Fullerton and then decommitted because he could have went to a higher school. And what would Matt Mitchell do in the Big West? He'd be a stud. And I think there are examples every year.
Yeah, especially now. Like trying to think of some other examples of guys like that. Well, I mean, this isn't a great one, but the first one that popped in my mind was Omar Silviero went from Santa Clara to URI. That's like a small jump, but it's one where maybe if he pans out and Santa Clara has a good coach in Herb Sendek, maybe they get a guy like him a little over their head. Oh, here's another one was Loyola Marymount had Kyron Cartwright and Elijah Stewart signed, right?
Yes, indeed.
And then coaching change, and both were very high level Power 6 players.
Yeah, I mean, we could go on all day about this, but I think the point stands that it's just so tough. And you have to hire great coaches. You have to have that up to top to bottom institutional support, and you have to hope those star players stay for 4 years. I mean, I thought it was great. When Jackson Hoy of the Stepien put out a thread about Jalen Pickett at Siena being like a sleeper NBA guy, and then I realized I'm like, if that dude leaves after 2 years, like John Morant's gonna, Siena's screwed. Like Siena isn't finding another Jalen Pickett. I mean, Jalen Pickett was available in May, and I don't know how, because that dude put up 21, I think 9 assists. It was 21, 9 assists, and 7 steals last game against Colgate. I mean, like, we're like, how it's so impossible to replace that guy. I mean, whether it's a transfer or up to a high major, or if it's a guy who goes up to the or it's a guy who just goes to the NBA early. I mean, the windows are so small for these teams, and it's just one player away from just falling apart.
No, absolutely. I mean, think about South Dakota State, who's not off to the start that many expected, but if Mike Daum grad transferred, which was heavily rumored, I mean, that's that sort of stuff is crushing. But I mean, that's you mentioned earlier. It's a common or a common potential reason about why mid majors down is all these kids are transferring up. But I mean, how many like ready-made mid-major teams, like teams that were ready to make a move nationally, were kind of broken up by the chancellors? Like maybe Albany with Cremo and Nichols, but even that, they're probably not going to push for an at-large.
They weren't good. That team had chemistry issues all over the place.
Yeah, so like, what's even an example of a ready-made team, a team that was like, if so and so didn't leave, we were gonna, be like a Buffalo this year, or like a Loyola last year.
Mount St. Mary's lost Elijah Long and Miles Wilson and Mount Osala. I mean, they're not getting an at-large, but like that team would have been good.
And Jonah Antonio too.
Well, that was the next year. They lost Antonio and Donald Carey the next class. Donald Carey went to Siena. Jonah Antonio's at JUCO. Like when you're like a 20-win team, NCAA tournament team, and then you lose those guys. There's Robert Morris once again, like lost like Marquise Pryor, or Marquise Reed
and Rodney Pryor.
Yeah, that's the one. Like those type guys. But I can't think of like a elite mid major that just had it fall apart. Like a good program.
Maybe Long Beach State losing. I mean they had already fallen off when Justin Bibbins left. But
oh yeah, they were not like a. I don't think guys are grad transferring from programs that are gonna go to the NCAA tournament. Like 2 or 3 years ago, Brett Bisping was gonna be a senior at Siena, and like everyone thought he might grad transfer. So they like Jordan Caroline leaving. They didn't leave Nevada to go to Illinois. I mean, that was kind of an extreme case because Nevada's a top 10 team, and Illinois is bad. Like Brett Bisping, there was talk like he grad transferred to Illinois because he was a Peoria native and was at Siena and was a 15-10 guy. And then he was like, "Nah, I'm staying." Like, I think for the most part, if you're ready to compete for a bid, which Siena thought they were that year, Nevada is this year, guys aren't just dipping.
Cool. So then, should we move into picking some games for the upcoming week?
Yeah, let's do it.
So do you want to pick every game of Big Ten ACC, or just do what we normally do, where we pick like 5 games each on the list that I put together?
Let's just pick 5 each. I picked all the Big Ten games on Michael Hunter's podcast. I don't really want to do that again.
All right, so you can have first pick if you want. This is up. I don't know if I finished. I definitely got to some of Thursday, but so definitely all of Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday's relevant games on the list.
I see a list. Okay. First game I wanted to pick because me and Michael Hunter had a great conversation about this game was NC State versus Wisconsin. I think I wound up picking NC State, but it's the game where I think one team's going to win by 20, and you're going to come away with like an absurd impression about one of those teams, and it's just because the styles are just so wrong. Like if this game winds up in the half court and Ethan Happ is just posting up on Derek Funderburk and Wyatt Walker all game, NC State's going to get hammered. But if this game gets up and down, Wisconsin might get 40-pieced. I think I'm going to go with NC State, though.
Yeah, these are two teams that have slipped way too high up my top 25. NC State hasn't played anybody. And then Wisconsin just has the one loss to Virginia. So I think right now NC State's 14 and Wisconsin's 16, which is much higher than I feel comfortable with any of them. I think maybe 17 and 20 or something is a little better for them. But I think I'm going to go Wisconsin at home here. NC State certainly has the talent to win, the talent to be a top 20 team. But Wisconsin, I've certainly seen it so far that they have the advantage in the front court. I think that their guards will hit shots, and I'll go with Wisconsin in this one.
Your pick.
I'm going to go – I'll go UVA and Maryland at Maryland. I'm going with Virginia. I saw Maryland demolish Marshall, which has me a little worried about my anti-Maryland stance, but they also haven't played anyone, and they've struggled with a few bad teams. So I'll go with Virginia to put Maryland in its place.
Yeah, Maryland has mostly struggled this year, and then they just blew the doors off Marshall. I don't know what happened. I wasn't watching. It was one of those where I was kind of expecting the bye game upset or at least a close game, and I checked the score and it's like a 40-point game, and you're just like, what happened? So I might look back at that tape a little bit tonight. But yeah, that was very I think Virginia finds a way. I think at home for Maryland is always a tough place to play. I think they'll hang in, but Virginia is way too much.
You're up.
Okay. I don't know. Let's pick UNC Michigan. That's got to get picked.
Okay. I'll go with UNC here. I have Michigan ranked higher, and they're at home, but I think UNC is still the better team. Michigan has gotten great contributions this far from Teske, Brazdeikis, and Isaiah Livers especially. I think that those guys are going to have to come back to earth eventually. I think UNC has the offensive firepower to kind of not get swallowed up by Michigan's defense like Villanova and Providence did.
I'm just going to bet on Michigan's defense. I mean, they're getting to Virginia levels of good on defense while having perhaps the best offensive mind in the country. I mean, that's so scary. I think Luke Yaklich, somebody's going to hire him and be very happy. I don't know who it's going to be, but if I'm a Horizon League athletic director, if I'm a Missouri Valley athletic director, if I'm an A10 even athletic director, he might be my first call.
Yeah, certainly. He certainly has the reputation now to go along with his kind of impact on the Michigan program. He has the reputation where he'll certainly get a job.
Not just what he did at Michigan. Look at the Illinois State fall off, not just as a team, but as a defense. They were an elite defense with that Paris Lee, Deontay Hawkins,
Kyle McIntosh.
That whole group. They were elite on D. And then after that, they've been turnstiles the last 2 years. I mean, yeah, Yaklich, give me him.
All right, I'm going Syracuse at Ohio State. I'm going to go with the upset here. I'm going with Syracuse. Frank Howard's back. It's the second game back. I think they're going to, be better offensively. And I think that, getting an experienced guy back in that zone will certainly make a difference. And I think Ohio State comes back to earth a little bit. I don't think that they're a top 25 team. I think that they kind of show that they're more of that maybe 30 to 35 ranked team.
In the words of Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend. Ohio State wins this game. I will say it's a little bit of a tricky matchup for them just because they rely so much on posting Wesson. I don't know how much they'll be able to do that against the zone. I don't know if he's a guy you want to catch in the high post. I don't know how Chukwu's health is doing. Yeah, I'm just so down on Cuse at this point. Ohio State wins this one, especially at home.
You're up for game 5.
Let's do. I mean, I feel like it'd be wrong not to pick Duke, Indiana, even though I think we all know that Duke's beating Indiana, just like I think we all know that Nevada's beating Loyola. Let's pick Purdue and Florida State because I think that game is legit intriguing.
Okay, I'm gonna stick with Florida State here. Their defense was very good today. They're just a little too sloppy, but I think that they can certainly frustrate Carson Edwards with their multitude of athletic guards. And I think that they have the front court to kind of neutralize, guys like Evan Boudreau, who had a big game against a smaller Virginia Tech front court, and they have the size to match up with like a Matt Harms. Give me Florida State here. I think MJ Walker has a bounce back game after being. I don't even know how many points he had today, 2, 4, but give me Florida State here.
Yeah, I'll agree on this one. I think Florida State is just they're going to be really good, really motivated to play this game. Purdue on the road might struggle. I think Florida State wins this ball game.
All right, I'm gonna go Nebraska over Clemson. Clemson, I'm very worried about this team. They obviously lose to Creighton, which isn't a bad loss. Creighton's probably kind of proving to be a at-large caliber team, but Clemson's also struggled in their preseason stuff and in having closer margins of victory in their bye games than anticipated. I think Nebraska gets the edge here, even with their lack of depth.
I'm going to pick Clemson. I think Clemson is at home, and Nebraska has just really struggled to win away from home over the last 2 years. I think that struggles continue into this game. Marquise Reed makes some big shots, and Amir Sims is really good.
Game 7.
All right. How about Michigan State, Louisville?
Okay, I'm going with Michigan State here. I think that they proved that they have very high talent level, especially with their big three of Ward, Winston, and Langford. Winston and Langford had huge games over the weekend, and I think that their depth is a little better than people give it credit for, especially guys like Aaron Henry and Kyle Arns, who also made some pretty meaningful contributions. Give me Michigan State. I think Louisville's gonna, at some point, they're gonna turn back into a pumpkin.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of torn here. I think there's a part of me that thinks this game is really close because I think, Louisville will be at home. That place will be rocking. I think Jordan Moore is going to have a big game, and Louisville's guards might be able to score on those bad defensive guards for Michigan State. But I think this is a game that's a 3-point game with 8 minutes to go, and then Michigan State pulls away.
All right, game number 8. I'll go with kind of a crazy upset here. I'll go with Boston College over Minnesota. I'm not even sure that I really believe it, but I think Minnesota is getting a little overinflated in terms of perception. I've seen them kind of being mentioned as like a top 25 team. The resume certainly speaks to that, but just something about this team, kind of like how I feel about Butler. Just something about this team just doesn't really excite me.
I don't have any problem with that. I think Minnesota's still trying to find their way. It feels like they play a lot of close games and they're winning a lot of close games. Boston College is actually favored in Vegas right now by a point, which I don't agree with.
Boston College that cost me a strike and rushed the court eliminator game.
Wake Forest cost me a strike with Houston freaking Baptist.
Bananas.
Minnesota's trying coffee a point guard. That'll be interesting. But yeah, no, I think I'll pick Minnesota to win this game.
Worth mentioning, very hot start from Gabe Kalcher. It was like a 3-star freshman, averaging like 13 points a game as their starting 2 guard. So that's certainly encouraging for them. Game 9, you're up.
Wow, just keep picking.
We can switch to the bye game if you want, but
yeah, I don't have any games that I feel super strongly about picking at this point.
Okay.
All right, so a bye game upset of the week. Mine is North Texas over Oklahoma. I just went on about how good I think Oklahoma is. I didn't get a chance to go on about how good I think North Texas is. North Texas is 8-0, and they haven't had Roosevelt Smart play yet. I mean, that is so scary. I mean, they're dynamic on off. Roosevelt Smart played one game. Excuse me. I think he came back either yesterday or in their last game, but he hadn't played. Umoja Gibson, their redshirt freshman, I wrote about him in my top 10 mid-major freshman list today. Just shooting the ball at an extremely high level, shooting 54%, I believe, from three. They have a good point guard, and Ryan Woolridge, who's averaging about 6 assists a game. And they're getting better front court play from Zach Simmons than they did last season. So, very dangerous team. I think they outshoot Oklahoma on Tuesday in Norman.
So last week, I broke my streak. I had Eastern Michigan over Rutgers, and Eastern Michigan got demolished. But the game I was deciding between was Lipscomb TCU. So I was close. I was right around the radar again. So I have a few different options to go with this week. I think the three that really stand out would be Wofford, South Carolina, Murray State, Alabama, and Rider, West Virginia. I'm gonna play it safe again, which could screw me. I'm gonna take Wofford over South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean that's not that. I wouldn't even think that's that huge an upset. I think Wofford's only like 7-point dogs. South Carolina has not been impressive, and Fletcher McGee's probably the best player on the floor. So yeah, I buy it.
And that concludes tonight, right? I mean, just there's one other kind of meaningful note, kind of regarding player movement. Akuk is going to enroll for second semester, and it looks like, if I had to put money on a score down, I would put it on Pitt. So Pitt could be getting a 5-star shot blocking, 3-point shooting forward to bolster their front court.
Yeah, I've been gut feeling it as well with Pitt because if he's enrolling second semester, he has to go somewhere with a scholarship, right? And no one has
4 of his final 5 have scholarships. Only UConn doesn't.
Right, and UConn was the favorite though.
Yeah,
so that's interesting. One other interesting player movement note, probably very niche, but I think it's interesting just because of the precedent it could set. So Elijah Burns on Monday announced he was grad transferred from Notre Dame. Saturday he announced he was going to Siena to finish his career. Now Elijah Burns is going to graduate in December and head to Siena right away. He has a chance to play for 2 teams in the same season because he played in 3 or 4 games with Notre Dame to start the year, then grad transferred, and he's going. They're confident that he's going to be allowed to play right away in December because he's a grad transfer. So he could play for 2 teams in one season.
So all of the previous guys to do this sat out that first half year.
Right.
So I'm not sure. I mean, they're confident he's going to be eligible, but I mean, I could easily see them being like, no, you already played for a team this year. You'll get your year next year.
Well, I don't know. But I guess with the rule, but the grad transfer rule, I mean, they say no time in residence, right? So if he's graduated, I don't see why he wouldn't be able to play the season. Other than the NCAA just not wanting to open a can of worms.
Yeah, because Dwayne Morgan and Jerry Baptiste both.
Ibrahima Diallo as well.
Yeah, they didn't play at that first semester. They just sat and then joined for the second semester. But we'll see if there's a new precedent.
Yeah.
Which is a very unique precedent, though. Like, it doesn't happen very often.
Right, yeah. And I don't think it's something you really want occurring that frequently unless it's with the grad transfer. Like, I wouldn't want, if they made it like all transfers didn't have to sit, the guys could just play mid-year. Like, they could be like on December 1st, be like, I ain't playing, and then just go to a school and play on December like 18th or whenever like the new school semester starts. Like,
yeah, that would be a disaster. That'd be a disaster.
But the grad transfer, I think, is probably fine. So hopefully, for Siena's sake, Elijah Burns is healthy. They need him. He'll be actually really good in the MAC. I mean, he's 6'8", super athletic, can run the floor, kind of play the 4 or the 5. He knows Siena's team because he plays pickup with them over the summer because he's from the area. So that was a super big pickup for Jamie and Christian. And City Rock kid staying home and playing in the city of Albany. Very good. Good news for Siena. That wraps us up, Brad, I believe.
Yep.
Appreciate you all listening. Hope you had a happy Thanksgiving. Hope you enjoy the coming week in college basketball. And keep enjoying the pod. Keep subscribing, rating, checking us out on Twitter, reading our work. We do appreciate it. Have a great night, everybody.